seeing and hearing is the traditional Chinese zither called the guzhou, played through an FX unit called Blackhole by Eventide Audio. It's a contemporary reverb pedal that, simply put, it makes it feel like you and your instrument are just drifting through outer space. In this video, I'm going to go over some basic techniques for improvising on an acoustic instrument or any instrument that you play in a sort of ambient, meditative kind of way. And at the same time, I'm going to be exploring the different functions of the black hole. Now, this video is geared towards people who already play an instrument and would like to try this sort of ambient, meditative, explorative kind of way to play. But first, some theory. Ambient music and traditional Chinese instruments have a lot more in common than you might think at first. Some people might see ambient music and classical music as a sort of dichotomy, right? Classical is the definition of musical form with all sorts of strict rules and more rigid structures, and ambient is the contemporary rejection of all that, right? There's no form. There's no, all the instruments are sort of obscured and cloudy, and it's music made to create an atmosphere. Now, classical instruments, it's a fair and common opinion to think that there is a very certain way to go about learning how to play these instruments. It's why classical training, above all other forms of learning, has just persisted throughout the years, right? Now, classical Chinese instruments, traditional Chinese instruments, have a very different history than that of, our Western classical instruments back home. Let me share some context. Traditional Chinese instruments are, and always have been, tools for developing oneself. Their origins are actually as tools of healing, right? Meant to cultivate character and a better sense of morality and spirituality. Not unlike most forms of meditation, right? Even today, people will approach learning a Chinese instrument such as the guqin or the shao with an intent to better oneself, right? And there's that common imagery of sitting in a tea house or your quiet apartment, just a natural, calm place, and practicing the instrument note by note, trying to create a better tone, and eventually working your way into learning, classical songs. Ambient music has a sort of similar approach. It's like a quiet time for whatever you want: self-reflection, appreciation, discovery of your instrument or of yourself, right? And generally creating a calm atmosphere, right? The difference is ambient music is the rejection of form, right? Rejection of that classical form, whereas traditional instrument study is a celebration of the classical form, right? Regardless, it's a bountiful, wonderful world to discover, that of ambient music, and I'm here to show you the simpler ways a traditional instrumentalist could approach using their own instrument to create ambience. Now, I've been living in China for a few years, combining traditional Chinese instruments with effects units just like this, and I would like to share my process with you, and hope you can find a way to discover this for yourself. I am an Eventide artist representing Eventide China, and they just shipped me the Black Hole and just asked me to share how I go about using it. Now, I've actually been using Black Hole for many years, using the Eventide H9, but now they have the Black Hole available as a cheaper single pedal, and it's a great tool, I think, and I'm eager to share with you how you could use it. So, I need to preface this video in saying that I'm self-taught on the guzheng and on all the classical Chinese instruments. I haven't had any teachers. I haven't gone through the rigorous classical training that many feel is required to play these instruments as they're meant to be played. Now, I did go through classical training on a few instruments in the West, trombone and piano and whatnot, but not on these. On these instruments, I'm entirely self-taught, and as a result, I play them inherently wrong, right? In some instances, I actually play them backwards, such as the guzheng. I'm sitting on the incorrect side of the instrument. The lower strings are actually supposed to be opposite from you. Now, the main reason for that is because I'm left-handed, and I didn't have a teacher to tell me this was the wrong way to go about it, and it just made more sense to me. Now, I'm thankful because my fans here in China seem to take no issue with this. They generally tend to praise it. They just say, you know, do your thing. This is you, and it's just kind of it's a new way to look at things, which is, you know, at the end of the day, that's what I'm here to provide. So, as musicians get deeper and deeper into exploring sounds and textures, they're going to come across some algorithm, some combination of their sounds, textures, techniques, tools, instruments, whatever it is that they choose to define themselves by. They build their signature sound out of whatever it is that interests them and inspires them the most. When people ask me, what's my way of playing, what's my signature sound, how do I sound like I sound, beyond this sort of ambient style of playing that I do, I usually just tell them Black Hole by Eventide. I'm serious, I put this reverb on almost everything now. You know, I get that it's not for everyone. It's a very digital, surreal kind of pedal, and if you're looking for something with a realistic sound, you know, this is definitely not the pedal. But you know, I've always been really inspired by ambience and shoegaze, and I've always wanted to just be able to play something very simple and then have it just hold in the air and just be like rich and amazing and very pretty based on something very simple. This video is very much an in-depth tutorial on how the Black Hole is going to work, but it's in the context of how a traditional musician would take their first steps into this deep pool, or, you know, deep cosmos that is ambient sound design using their instrument. The way this video is going to work, I'm going to showcase one function of the pedal at a time, and for each function I'm going to pair it with a particular technique for improvisation, ambient sound design, and you can easily apply these techniques to your performance even if you don't have you know, a fancy reverb pedal. So even if you have no interest in the Black Hole in particular, I hope you can still follow along and find something you like. Alright, for this video, you're going to need your instrument, obviously, and then you're going to need some sort of microphone that goes out to a 6.35mm jack. You can use an internal microphone, or an external microphone like this, or you can have a contact microphone, one that sticks to your instrument. It can have a battery in the inside or not, whatever. The important thing is that if you're using pedals, it needs to go out to a 6.35 jack. Then you're going to need either an amplifier or a speaker, or a pair of headphones with a Y splitter, or a computer with an audio interface. There's all sorts of different ways to rig this sort of thing up. Now, I can go over it in a future video if you like, but it takes me about 20 minutes to explain all the different options and how to go about electrifying an instrument for the first time. So for the sake of keeping this video moderately short, I'm going to skip over the basic audio signal flow of this video. But if you have any questions, just feel free to leave a comment. Lastly, I'm going to be referring to Chinese instruments throughout the video for my Chinese fan base. But the same theory applies to any physical acoustic instrument, but to some extent it also applies to synthesizers, electronic instruments. I'm going to try to label the chapters, so just skip around and find the technique or the function that appeals to you the most. Okay? Okay, pedals all set up, let's get started. So the Blackhole has 6 different knobs, and every knob has 2 functions, right? The second function is accessible by pressing this little button here, and we're going to get into all the functions throughout the video, right? Let's start with the basics. On button is your active, and we're going to start with this mix function. Now, the mix is your ratio between your dry signal and your wet signal. Dry is just unaffected, normal microphone sound. So if we turn it all the way to the left, which is dry, you're going to hear now if we turn it to the middle, you start to hear the reverb a little bit. But you also still hear the dry signal. However, if we were to turn this all the way to the right, now we are at 100% wet, which means you're only going to hear the reverb sound. Kind of a cool effect because you're just making the texture and you don't hear the initial attack of the notes at all. The first ambient technique this helps us understand is what I call balance. It's important to remember that as interesting as these effects are, they're only there to support you and your performance and your instrument. In a typical performance, or in the studio, reverb is usually maxed out at about 15%, which is like way down here. And the reverb is supposed to be like a light touch. For ambient music and such, of course, you can push it a little bit. But you still want to be able to hear, the nuances of what instrument you're playing. You want to be able to hear that attack and the resonance that's naturally created by the instrument. So this first exercise is in balance, and it's up to you to explore how much of this reverb you like and how it can support the way you play as well. Because with a very long reverb tail, it might encourage you to try playing a little differently. So to begin, start with your mix at 0, play a little bit, and then slowly raise it over the course of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you have. something as simple as just playing with the mix of your pedal really helps you internalize how much reverb you want and how much that original tone of your instrument you want to, blend. Finding that perfect ratio, of course it's going to change. It's not something you always stick to, but it's just a good way to kind of get started and get familiar with the basic function of your pedal. So, balance is a great way to start. Just the balance between your instrument and the pedal, your balance between your effect and your performance. We're going to move down here to the size knob. Size is how big the space is. This pedal is creating an artificial space that your instrument are settled in. Now on the left you'll hear there's definitely a room. We're definitely in a space, but it is quite small, maybe a little shallow. It's magical, but the reverb is sort of short-lived. Now, compare that to you can hear the frequency going lower as the room gets bigger. Now all of a sudden this imagined room is much, much bigger. Now it sort of feels like we are maybe outside of the spaceship. Maybe now we're floating through space. And let's push this to the limit and see how it sounds. Now it doesn't exactly mean how long the reverb lasts, okay? That's going to be the feedback, which we'll get to next. The size of the room has a lot to do with the delay, the frequencies that are being played back and how it affects the sound of the reverb. Without going too in depth, it just makes the space sort of bigger. That initial sustain is quite a bit longer, and it just has quite a big effect. Right, so hope you can hear the difference there. The second ambient technique, then, is to create a sort of mindset for yourself. Okay, if we're going to sit down to make ambient music, we want to put ourselves in the right state of mind. And building an imagined room for yourself, out of a reverb pedal is a great way to sort of build this, it could be an imagined place that you're in, or it could just be, the space inside of your head, the space inside of your mind, however abstract you want to be with it, right? If you ever have an active imagination as a kid, or if you have any experience in meditating, you'll have no problem with this part. While you explore the size of the imagined space inside of the reverb pedal, you can also explore the imagined space inside of your mind, or your heart, or your soul, or, wherever you want to be while you explore this sort of ambient improvisation. Maybe you want to pretend you're like in a spaceship, for real, Mindful or mindless, just explore one spot at a time, and you'll get a clearer and clearer image of the space that you're going to be in. Everyone approaches this sort of mindset differently, right? It's up to you to figure out how you go about thinking or preventing yourself from thinking, but when you sit down to make ambient music, it's up to you to decide what kind of mindset you're in. If developing a sense of size for this imaginary room is helpful to you, then by all means, use it to help you build that space. Alright, this next one's a little less abstract, thankfully. The high and the low knobs. They basically add or cut the higher and lower frequencies of your microphone, right? So, let's just equal these out. We have our basic sound here. If we were to crank the high, you can hear the higher frequencies are a little more sparkly, a little louder, or we can cut it. And now we're only playing with sort of the lower frequencies here. Now, some microphones are, a little bit more bass heavy, or maybe they don't have enough bass, so you can, of course, use these knobs to sort of correct the sound. And, you could also use it to be a little more creative, but this is a good chance to start using a technique, which is very simple, what I call recurring phrases. Repetition is really good for calming the mind, which is why rhythm is full of recurring things like melodies, rhythms, drum beat even, And you can use this time of just coming up with a very simple pattern such as this to really hear the difference of the frequencies here. If you're going to play the same phrase again and again and again, which is, quite good for relaxing, You can also slowly adjust the sound of your pedal using the high and low knobs. And this makes it very, very easy to hear the difference between the different settings of these knobs here. You play the same phrase again and again and again. And slowly, carefully, pay very close attention to the frequencies. Improvisation, to many musicians, might feel like a sort of random exploration of, new phrases, new musical phrases, or, and it can be totally random if you like. But the moment you find a phrase that you like, just do it again. Just do it 8 times in a row. Just like practicing anything. Doing it again and again and again will help you become more dexterous and focused. It might train your short-term memory, which, if you're like me, suffers a lot when you're playing, just being able to remember little phrases. There we go, like a nice little ambient track going in it. Okay, moving over here to the feedback knob. Feedback is precisely how long the reverb is allowed to last, is allowed to ring out, right? Now, even at its lowest setting, the black hole pedal still lasts quite a bit longer than most reverb pedals. Because it's a sort of special kind of reverb. It's contemporary. It's a new idea. A realistic reverb, like this, would be very, very, very short. And that's what it would sound like to be in, a sort of larger room. Maybe a cathedral. Maybe something large with, some reverberation, but nothing like this, right? You would have to be in like a massive cavern to ever hear something like that in real life. So you just push it a little bit past 50 and we're already in the world of surreal, fantasy and, imagined reverb. Now in theory there wouldn't really be any reverberation in space, but if we had to guess, if we had to imagine, it would probably sound something like this. This leads us to the next technique, which is playing sparsely. They say a little reverb goes a long way. So now we're sort of reversing the adage, right? If you want your reverb to be this pronounced, this long, you need to limit how much you play. Because, if you play too many notes at once, or too many phrases, it's just going to create mud, right? You can't give a pedal too much to work with. It's going to sound like... right? It's too crazy. Okay. This is where practicing self-control becomes essential, right? Practice playing as little as you can, as sparsely as you can. Really let the reverb shine. So let's try that now. Give yourself plenty of time in between notes to hear and kind of soak in the reverb. When you first start out improvising, playing sparsely is a very difficult thing to do because you want to hear what comes next. You want to, you tend to be thinking fast and not controlling yourself. So this is your chance to really slow down. Even count to 3 Mississippi between notes if you need to. Ready? Like, pick a chord or a note. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. 1 Mississippi, no, just do what you want. And as you increase the feedback of your reverb, as you make your reverb longer, you're going to have to give yourself more time because the reverb is going to demand more space. Really let that ring out. Of course, this also helps build an ambient track because, you don't want to demand too much attention. Brian Eno had said that ambient music needs to be able to be appreciated at any level of attention. You should be able to focus all of your attention on it or none of your attention and be able to appreciate it. So, sparse playing really helps create something peaceful. Now, unlike most reverb pedals, the black hole really pushes the feedback to the maximum. If you turn your feedback knob to 90%, it creates what's called infinite reverb. Of sparse playing, you need to be very, very careful what you play because, it will sustain forever. Now, you'll also notice that we haven't reached 100% on the feedback knob. That's because there's another function here called freeze. If you turn your knob 100%, then the infinite reverb will sustain itself forever. But you can now play on top of it and it won't add more reverb, such as this. Watch. This sort of thing is very good if you have some accompaniment, such as a flute, a second instrument. Now, without a second instrument, or even with, this might feel a little disorienting because until now we've only been playing the instrument through some reverb. Suddenly, the dry signal, in addition to this frozen sound, might feel a little empty or naked, right? At least by comparison. And that's fine. That's actually what we're going for, because the next ambient technique is what I call contrast, which is very, very important to keep ambient music from just being a muddy collection of synths and just sounds, right? We need points of contrast. Just like a good photograph or a good piece of art, we need some sort of distinction between sounds. Having multiple instruments like the flute and the guzheng together, or using freeze and occasionally playing a clean phrase, like a phrase that's dry without reverb. This will create some sort of natural contrast, right? And it helps us create some dynamics, some differences between phrases and sounds, like this. This is the functionality that has caused guitar players and other musicians to consider the black hole or other freeze pedals as instruments within themselves. Because creating a tone from your instrument and then freezing it and playing on top of it is functionally the same as like having someone accompany you on a keyboard or a synthesizer or like a drone instrument, and just having a secondary tone while you focus on your primary tone is a really interesting and like helpful tool, and really can help you create that sort of contrast between the sustained drone and your own primary sound. Typically these devices would sit at your feet while you play. Stomp boxes, you're supposed to stomp on them with your foot, right? Now, it's a little hard to be messing around with this knob while it's on the ground, right? That's what this second switch here is for, the freeze knob, right? So let's play a note and then freeze it and then play on top of it, creating a contrast between the accompanying note and the leading voice. And again, you can just imagine it's at my feet. I'm sitting on the ground, so I can't really do that demo right now, but so we'll come back to gravity in just a little bit. For now, we're going to start to visit the secondary functions, right? By pressing this little button in the top right corner, now the knobs all have different functions. Except for mix. Mix just stays the same. Let's start off with delay, okay? Delay is aptly named the delay between the note that you play and the created reverb. When it's turned all the way to the left here, then the reverb will start as soon as you play a note, right? Nice. But when we turn this knob, the reverb will wait just a short little time, and we'll have just a little bit of gap. At lower levels of delay, this gives your original note just a little bit of space to breathe. But with a little bit more delay, say 1,000 milliseconds, 1 second, this creates a sort of call and response. Call and response goes back as far as ancient Greek choirs, right? And is literally a form of self-reflection. Play something, send it off into the cosmos, and see what comes back. Sort of an imagined conversation with oneself, right? Or a choir of angels, or in this case, the cosmos. This is an excellent way to start improvising, because you can just play something and then just wait just a little bit and hear it comes back, and then reply to it. Remember, you have to be sparse. I delayed talking about the gravity function of this as long as I could, because it is the most complex part about this device, but it also is the most iconic feature of the black hole. It's very, very, very cool, but it's, as a result, it's the hardest part to describe and has a couple of different knobs, so bear with me as I do my best to explain what black hole does. The gravity function affects the tone and the pitch of the reverb. It's sort of an abstract idea, right? Based on the theory that gravity warps time and space. So around a black hole out in space, everything we know about time and space starts to warp. As a result, the knob will warp the imagined space of your reverb, which translates to pitch and tone. It's as if we're getting closer and closer to that black hole out in space, and physics again start to bend and go, a little crazy. Now, I'm going to start by turning the gravity to 100%, so we can really, really hear. And you may notice that there's no difference at all. Let me turn down the delay, turn gravity up to 100%. So even at 100% gravity, there's no change, right? That's because the controls for gravity are also in the secondary function of these two knobs here, right? If I turn the depth to 100%, ready? Listen carefully what happens to the sound. You can hear the tone in the room warp and sort of melt as the sound progresses. In simple terms, the tone, the pitch, goes down as time goes on, and then eventually kind of comes back up, right? It's sort of an LFO. It's sort of a, it's a little complex how the gravity works, and to be honest, I don't totally understand, but... The rate knob adjusts how quickly that change takes place. So it's a little crazy, but maybe you can find some kind of medium that you like. There we go. back to the gravity knob for a moment, okay? You'll see there's actually two symbols, one at 0 and one at 100%, and this one is the inverted version of this one, right? Different shapes. Now, that's because the center of your knob is actually your standard decay from 50% all the way up to 100%, right? That's your sort of gravity decay. But going from 50% back to 0%, and you'll get what's called inverse decay, which has the opposite of effect of decay and sort of softens your attack of the reverb and really lets it grow. Listen to this. That's some pretty out there stuff. Now, on an instrument with more sustain, like a guitar, this might be a little bit more practical. Now, if we were to try this with some flute, okay? Let's see how it sounds with something a little bit more sustained. The technique here is sonic exploration. I warmly welcome any traditional instrument player out there to begin exploring this wonderful, beautiful world of electronic sound. Because exploring these new areas, you might find something that really, really inspires you and gives you a sort of like inspirational buff to keep trying and eventually discover a new sound. Again, you have to be careful. You don't want to end up with a massive pedal board because you fall super into the world of sonic exploration, but a little bit of exploring, trying new sounds, especially electronic sounds, can go a really long way when it comes to building your personal sound. So your exploration is to play as you would, but through some very distinct and unique effects, and see what comes out of it. There's two more knobs here. I don't have any particular technique associated with them, but they're both very, very helpful, so I just kind of want to go over it real quick. You have your Q knob. Q stands for quality, and it's with regards to a visual EQ, right? A graphic equalizer, right? Q adjusts the resonance of the filter for the high and low knobs. It might be easier to look at a graphic equalizer on Ableton or whatever to really pinpoint what this knob actually does. But adjusting the high frequencies creates what's called a filter, right? And adding Q is taking the part of that frequency being adjusted and raising it to create what's called a resonance. Have a listen. I'll play a little bit and see if you can hear what I mean. I'm gonna turn the high up, get the Q. Let's do some regular gravity here. Now, every microphone is different, and you might find a certain frequency that needs a little bump, or you might find some frequency helps create a more interesting, creative reverb, right? Again, use your ears, make minor adjustments, and you'll figure it out. And finally, this last knob here, the out level, this just increases your gain, right? It increases the output level of the device, and this is super helpful, especially if you're using like a pickup piezo microphone, right? Something that's a little quiet. Generally, try to keep this at 50%, and adjust the volume in your amp. But if you can't do that, it's super convenient to have one extra place to raise your volume. If it's alright with you, I'm going to do the rest of this video without the guzheng because my legs are completely asleep and it's starting to get dark. So, if you want to adjust any of these knobs while the black hole is on the ground, if you're using both of your hands, you can also use a device called an expression pedal. And, using some, you can follow it in the manual, you can map any of these functions to an expression pedal. So if you wanted to, say, adjust the gravity, right, with your foot, you can do that in the middle of a performance, right? Or if just the general feedback, or even the mix, anything you want to do, you can adjust using an expression pedal. So super, super helpful. The manual has instructions on exactly how to do this, and it's it's very, very, very deep. If you find settings you like, you can save them as presets, right? You can go online, you can download other people's presets. You can use the presets that are built into the device. They're all quite good. And you can just add more. It's all using USB, which is super helpful. If you long press the freeze button, you can switch to the preset selector, which you hit the different. You can go through your what's called a preset ladder here, and switch between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 presets. Hit active to confirm, and now we're in the first preset. This is really helpful if you have different presets for different instruments or for different songs, or if you just have 5 different flavors of reverb that you like to use throughout your playing. I'm going to conclude this video by showcasing 4 of the preloaded presets to demonstrate how diverse the sounds out of a pedal like this can get. I'll also showcase all of the techniques I've played so far, and I truly hope this video encourages more traditional musicians to try their hand at freeform ambient performance. If you fall in love with the idea of adding effects to your instrument, just know that there's a whole world of effects out there for you to try. Eventide, for example, has pedals for different kinds of reverb, for pitch, chorus, and the H9 Max is the sort of everything in one pedal that can do just about everything. I'm Yuke's, based in Chengdu, China. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy.